Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a vlog where I am reading 3 hunger-based horror books. Now, this is a trend that I started picking up on last year, and I've noticed releases continuing into this year have a lot of hunger-based horror, and a lot of the books on my TBR that I want to pick up in the horror genre specifically have to deal with a lot of hunger-based themes. So I have 3 books that have those kind of tropes in very, very different ways. The ways in which they're going to explore appetite and hunger and desire. I'm really excited to get to all 3 of these. So let's go ahead and introduce the books before we get into the vlog. So the first book that I'm going to be reading, I feel like we can't talk about hunger-based horror without vampires, and that would be Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This is a Carmilla retelling, and if you just know anything about vampires, their thirst, their desire for blood is very central to their mythos. So I am really excited to read this one. I have been holding off on reading this book just for this vlog, so cannot wait to get to this one. I do like Carmilla. I'm intrigued by the retelling and by the themes of hunger and craving and desire that are going to be in this book. Next up, we have Beta Vulgaris by Margie Sarsfield, and this is about a woman and her boyfriend who go to a beet farm to help out. It's like a gig job so they can save up enough money to supplement their income, and weird things start happening. The themes of this one, at least based on the blurb on the back cover, have to deal with hunger and consumption and class conflict. So very, very intriguing. No vampires this time, but beets and a farm at the center of this horror slash literary weird book. And then last but not least, we have The Lamb by Lucy Rose, and this is a book about cannibalism. So that is where that hunger comes into play, but we also have themes of, this is following a young woman and her mother. I believe her mother has a very interesting taste for certain kinds of flesh that maybe don't come from animals, and also we have our main character having a hunger, a craving, a desire for something more out of her life. So this is actually the book I'm going to start out this vlog with, but I'm really excited. 3 very different, at least based on the synopses, portrayals of the themes of hunger and consumption in horror. So really excited for this vlog. Let's go ahead and get to reading. I'm gonna go start in on The Lamb, and I will check back in with y'all when I have a reading update. So I am now 30% of the way through The Lamb, and I don't know how I'm feeling about this one so far. I'm not immediately gripped or loving it as much as I thought I would be, but we are following main character Margot and her mother, and they live in a cottage in the woods, and they have a very, very interesting family dynamic. This is a book about cannibalism from page 1. You see that is the case, and it is very explicit. There's a lot of descriptions of eating human flesh, and from the first page, like, this is not metaphorical cannibalism. This is the real deal. So Margot and her mother, they eat people. Margot's mother calls them strays. They live in the middle of nowhere, and when they find lost people that maybe their car broke down on the side of the road, or hikers, they bring them in and they turn these strays into meals. And this is very explicitly described from, again, page 1, that this is what they do to people. So this is pretty intense on the body horror, but I think what makes it like very uneasy is that our main character Margot is about 11 or 12, I believe. I think she's 11, but the matter-of-fact way that she describes her mother and hers relationship, and of course like what they eat and how they prepare what they eat, is so matter-of-fact, and I think that adds to the creep factor, that it's not not like people are unwilling to do this, and it's not like Margot realizes fully that this is like not a normal thing that people do. It's just the way her and her mother have always lived, and her mother does not treat her very well. So trigger warnings, obviously a lot of people I'm sure could guess that cannibalism was going to be a trigger for this one and the body horror that comes with that, but just the mother-daughter relationship in this one is very hard to read from. Margot's mother doesn't really seem to like her all that much. She's very emotionally abusive and manipulative, so that's hard to read. That's honestly harder to read for me than the cannibalism stuff. I've read body horror before, so it's not something that's really grotesque. I mean, that part's gross obviously, but just the hardest parts of this to read for me is the way that Margot is treated by her mother. And the way that this is written feels like the prose feels very simplistic and straightforward and to the point, and that is because our protagonist is so young. And in a lot of ways this also kind of reads like a fairy tale, a folk fairy tale, and for this one you really kind of, I feel like at this point in the story at least, have to suspend your disbelief. I know cannibalism is not like fiction, it's not something that's purely fiction at least, but the way, and this takes place in modern day, so the way that Margot and her mother live and seem to be able to do this with no repercussions. And there's also descriptions of eating certain body parts and certain body parts raw that just like scientifically doesn't really make sense. So you do have to suspend your disbelief and kind of go into it reading this as a modern day fairy tale. So Margot is very isolated. She doesn't have many friends at school. She only has her mother at home, and that's a really horrible environment. And then the inciting incident for this book that has just started to happen at the 30% mark of this novel is a character comes to the house that they share, and this woman is supposed to be just another stray, just another person that they're going to cook and eat for dinner, but there's something very different about this stray named Eden, and she starts to become entwined with both Margot and her mother, and the family dynamic changes a little bit. So this one, I don't know how I'm feeling about it. Number one, I didn't realize that our protagonist was so young. I think she's going to be about 11 years old the entire time. That's neither here nor there, just something I thought we were going to have just a little bit of an older protagonist, maybe like high school aged or something like that. That's fine. I don't know why I didn't think this was going to be in the modern day, maybe because I feel like people couldn't get away with this in the modern day because it's harder for people to go missing now than it was a number of years ago. So I have to adjust my expectations about that, and the writing style is just not my favorite, but it's all right so far. And I don't think I've ever read a cannibal story where the cannibalism is also a commentary on a mother and daughter relationship. So this one is reading very fast because of the writing style and because the chapters are like, they're all very short. They're all 1, 2, maybe 3 pages. So definitely a book that I can fly through, and I'm very intrigued to see, like, I think the ante's been upped a little bit now that we've gotten the introduction out of the way and have this new character come in and shake up this family dynamic. I am interested to see where the story's gonna go from here. So I finished The Lamb, and this one just ended up being okay for me. A lot of my issues with this one actually, I think, would have been solved if it was a short story or a novella. The middle of this one just felt very repetitive. Margot and her mother bringing in a stray, killing them, preparing them, eating them, waiting for another stray, finding another one, bringing it home, rinse and repeat. So that felt just a little bit repetitive, like at the middle mark of this one. And the themes and the symbolism and the commentary in this one was interesting, but they were all addressed so early in this book that just the middle really felt laggy to me. So the pacing for this one just wasn't my favorite. I feel like the middle really bogged down a strong beginning and an interesting end. And then the other thing that was just really kind of frustrating about this one is it does take a lot of suspension of disbelief by the reader to buy into this story, because there are a lot of details that just don't add up and don't make sense about this story. So I feel like had it not been taken place in modern day, or if it was just shorter, we could have suspended the disbelief. It just doesn't really, the story doesn't make sense, like the setup, because our main character Margot and her mother, they're very isolated, but Margot goes to school, her mother doesn't have a job, and her mother doesn't like going out and doing things in the community. They prefer to stay at their cabin. However, like there are some things like how do they get groceries? That's never, like there are just a lot of things that don't add up that feel nitpicky when I'm saying them right now, but it does keep taking away from the story when you're trying to figure out how all of this has been allowed to happen for so long and how any of this like really works. So unfortunately, just this one, I was a little bit let down with those aspects, and just I think if this would have been a shorter folksy short story or novella, it would have worked better for me. I did mention earlier that I thought the writing style was just a little bit on the simplistic side. I think that was intentional because Margot is such a young main character. So I would be interested in checking out more by this author later on down the line. The Lamb was this author's debut, and overall it was interesting. If you were looking for an exploration of cannibalism with a mother and daughter relationship at the center, then you may like this one. Just trigger warnings obviously for cannibalism, but the way in which Margot is treated by the parental figures in her life, and even just any adult figures pretty much, except for there's a bus driver and a school nurse, but the way that Margot is let down was harder for me to read than any of the cannibalism. So just know that going in, it's a very toxic mother-daughter relationship. So that was The Lamb. We are moving on to the second book in this vlog, and that would be Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This is a retelling of Carmilla. I believe it takes place during the Industrial Age. Yes, so it is the height of the Industrial Revolution. We are following main character Lenore, and she is married to a steel magnate, and they meet a mysterious woman named Carmilla. So I'm going to go get to reading Hungerstone. This is the book out of the 3 books in this vlog that I have the highest expectations for, and I'm also the most excited for. So I'm going to get to reading, and I'll check back in later with a reading update. It is a very dark and stormy and gloomy day outside, which makes it the perfect day to read Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. I am 20% of the way through this one so far, and I'm loving it. This is, of course, a Carmilla retelling, and it has been a while since I've read Carmilla, but I really enjoyed that novella. It predates Dracula, and it's very like traditional vampire-y. A lot of the tropes that we think of when we think of vampires comes from works like Carmilla and Dracula, and this one is definitely along the lines so far of a very traditional vampire story, which I really love. I've read 2 books this year. I've read Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna Van Veen and The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Both of these are absolute hits for me. I loved them both. They were both great vampire books. They did both have a little bit of a spin, a little bit of a twist on the vampire mythos. This one feels the most traditional, and I'm just loving it. So we are following main character Lenore. She is 30 years old. She is married to her husband Henry, who is a very big deal in the steel industry. They are very wealthy. They are a very happy and content couple on the outside, but of course, happy marriages sometimes from the outside are not so happy on the inside. There is a very distinct lack of love and intimacy in their relationship. This also takes place during the Industrial Revolution era in 1888. So while they are content, there's obviously some things that just aren't the best in this marriage. And I do read a lot of historical, and I do have a degree in history, so I know a lot of marriage relationships are very different than what we consider them today. However, even by those standards, there's just something missing in this marriage between the two of them. Lenore worries it is because she has not had a child. And in the 1880s, if you're 30, they've been married for about 10 years now. This is not the greatest thing to happen. So she worries that that is kind of causing a rift in their relationship. He is also having some troubles with his work that he doesn't tell her about because she's just a woman, she's just his wife. So there's a little bit of that friction going on, and that actually leads them to spend the summer away from London in a very isolated estate, which on the way to this estate, they discover a carriage that is overturned on the side of the road, and there is a young woman who is trapped inside. They take her to the estate with them to help nurse her back to health. Her name is Carmilla, and she is a very interesting character, one who Lenore swears that she has seen in a dream before. She becomes a companion to Lenore because she is stuck at this estate. There's not a lot of things to do nearby. Henry is constantly leaving to attend to his business, so Lenore is at this estate tasked with bringing it up to standards herself and also taking care of Carmilla. And I just really liking like the new added elements, and then also staying pretty truthful to Carmilla, the original story. So yeah, I'm really liking this so far. What I love already is that the talks of blood and hunger, those things really control Lenore's life already when talking about, you know, she is in her 30s and she is childless. So every month when she gets her period, like that blood very much signifies a failure for her on a lot of accounts. And then she feels so many emotions like any human, but her husband constantly praises her for not being emotional like other women. So she keeps a lot inside herself and a lot repressed inside herself. And I like the way that those themes are already being explored. So yeah, like I said, it's a very gloomy day outside. I mean, I'm wearing a sweatshirt in Arkansas in May. That's not typical, but it's a very perfect day to be reading a gothic horror. So I am going to dive back into this one, and I'm hoping that just the rest of this just goes as wonderfully as the first 20% of this book has, because it's been a pretty perfect reading experience for me so far. So I finished Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, and I really loved this one. 2025 has just been the year of the vampire in fiction, in media, in books, and in movies. I have just found so many wins, so many successes. This is definitely a book that is a great example of a successful retelling, at least for me. It captures the atmosphere, the gothic, slow-moving atmosphere that I loved in Carmilla, and just I think this is a great retelling. If you liked Carmilla, I think you'll like this. This isn't just like a page-by-page adaptation either, though. There is more plot introduced. I feel like Lenore as a main character is just so complex and quite unlikable, honestly. Like, she's not a perfect main character, and you want to root for her so badly, and just the situation that she's in is very sympathetic, but her internal monologues, sometimes not the most sympathetic. So it's really interesting watching her and seeing the plot beats if you've read Carmilla, recognizing things from the original text and then getting that additional information in here. I just had such a great time with this book. I thought this book explored the themes of hunger really well, and for a vlog that is all about hunger-based horror, I felt like this just really hit the mark. In the acknowledgements, Kat Dunn says, "I became interested in the idea of appetite in its most expansive sense. The figure of the vampire is a sinister one, and one of pure want, need, of monstrous appetite. Rereading Carmilla pushed a door open to me, gave root to my thinking, and narrative shape to my own confused appetite." So this one definitely focuses on hunger and the ways that that intersects in a horror novel. So if you loved Carmilla, I think you'll really enjoy this retelling. If you haven't read Carmilla, I think this is a pretty accessible book on its own. I feel like if you read this and love it, then you could dive into Carmilla. I know that the classics are very intimidating for a lot of people, so this could be a really good way to dip your toe into this. This book also has a historical note and lists not just Carmilla, but lots of other works that influenced this book, and it kind of has me craving reading some of those classics. I've been thinking that I want to reread Dracula for a while this year. I just feel like that's in the cards for me, but some of these books that were recommended in the historical notes section I've either not read before or read a really long time ago, so I feel like maybe I could enter a sort of gothic era this spring moving into summer. But yeah, I really loved this. This is the most like classic gothic vampires of everything that I've read or watched this year, so I really enjoyed this one. So that leads us to the third and final book of this vlog, Beta Vulgaris by Margie Sarsfield. We are following a couple who need to make ends meet, so they sign up to do a like sugar beet harvest as a part-time gig to help them save up enough money to cover the rent on their apartment, and weird things start happening during this harvest. The back of this book says Beta Vulgaris harnesses a distinctive voice and audacious premise to undermine straightforward narratives of class, trauma, consumption, and redemption, and this has such a fun cover. All three of the books in this vlog have such striking covers in such different ways. I love a pink horror cover. I like brightly covered horror novels, just novels in general. So this one is very striking, and I'm gonna go see what this one is about. So I'm about 45% of the way through Beta Vulgaris, and I am enjoying this one. This one's definitely going to be a little bit more of a literary time than a straightforward horror. So far, it's very slow. Even though this is less than 300 pages, this is a very internal, character-driven story so far, which I am enjoying. However, I think just based on blurbs and knowing that it's a horror, I think I expected just a little bit more to happen, but this is a very bleak, like Midwestern Gothic sort of story almost, and Elise, our main character, is a very interesting character. But I will say trigger warnings for this one is that Elise has a past with disordered eating and an eating disorder, so if you struggle with any of that, if you have struggled with any of that in the past, it's very much present and prevalent in this one. Whenever she looks at food, is talking about food, is thinking about food, she adds up the calories in her head. There's a constant running monologue of what each food costs in terms of calories and how much that she would have to work out and exercise to get rid of those calories. So it's very much like a constant thread running through her mind, and that's very accurate to how someone who has struggled with that before thinks, but it could be very triggering if you've ever been in that situation. So heads up for that. Also, this is one where the main character Elise and her boyfriend Tom, they are participating in this beet harvest because they need the money. Elise in particular desperately needs this money to keep paying her rent, to pay her bills. She's falling behind, and the financial tension and stress that she is under is very anxiety inducing. So if that is something that you are worrying about right now, then this isn't going to be an escapism book for you. It's going to be very relatable, but it's not going to be very like escapism or fun in that aspect, because also alongside with the food and the constant food noise about that, there's this constant anxiety of financial situations that Elise has, just her credit card, her rent, every single paycheck. Like, she's constantly running the numbers, thinking about food, thinking about her life and how to pay for things. So, you know, if any of that is like a difficult subject for you, I would probably stay clear of this one, just because it is so internal so far. That seems to be the focus. But we do have Elise and Tom, and they travel from New York. They're city people. They go to Minnesota, and they are going to participate in this beet harvest, and they are overnight workers, so they're gonna get paid a lot of money, much more than their usual jobs pay them. So they're doing this for a couple of weeks, and their employers, the place that is hosting them, give them like a campsite, and there's a church nearby that provides food for them, because they're not the only people who are doing this just because they're in a dire financial situation. So they go and they're participating in this very heavy, very manual labor, and Elise of course is constantly worrying about money. Like, she needs this job. This is not a great job fit for her, not something that she wants to do. It's really pushing her out of her comfort zone. She's a very anxious character, and just having to uproot everything and go to this random location and basically camp out for about a month with a bunch of strangers and do a very tenuous, grueling job, like the night shift as well, that makes it a lot harder on your psyche. And just relying on things, she constantly talks about how she is below the poverty line, but she constantly thinks that like when she takes like free lunch or free dinner from the church, that she feels like she's not deserving enough, she's not suffering enough, and that other people should be getting it other than her. So the internal monologues, very interesting. Also, I think just based on some clues, it hasn't stated what year this is in, but just based on some clues, topics of conversation, different political conversations, I think this takes place in 2011 or 2012. So that's interesting as well. It's very much like a country coming out of a recession, while some people are still very much suffering with the ramifications of that. So it's definitely very interesting. I don't know at this point if I would necessarily call it like horror, like straightforward horror. I have heard that towards the end, this does get very crazy. And while Elise is working at this beet plant, this conveyor belt, and just doing her daily manual labor tasks, there are some little creepy things that start happening here and there. So there's definitely some horror happening. It's a very uneasy situation because Elise she needs this job. She can't just up and leave. So she has to kind of muscle through any discomfort that she feels at this job, things that are happening at this job, and that's just also adds to like a sense of isolation. It's creepy thinking about working on the night shift in the middle of nowhere. So that is pretty creepy, and Elise's pessimism and just her internal monologue is very draining, but in an interesting way. I'm having an interesting time with this book, but I am curious to see where it goes because it's marked as horror. I would definitely say probably, we'll say like a modern Midwest Gothic sort of story, kind of exploring like the decay of the middle class and running into like the lower class, paycheck to paycheck sort of situation, and just the agony and horror of that just being your day to day, like the rat race of all of that. So definitely a really interesting book. I would say this is definitely like weird girl literary fiction with a splash of horror. That could change, but definitely interested to see where the next half of this book takes me. So I did finish Beta Vulgaris, and overall I did enjoy this one. I would hesitantly call this horror. I think it's a book that I have no problem personally saying it's a horror book. It definitely fits under like the dark horror speculative fiction umbrella, but this one also just feels like very dark, weird, off-putting literary fiction as well. So I think, I don't know, I think I was hoping that the body horror would just go a little bit more body horror, just a little bit more to the next level, but I did enjoy this story. It was very, very insular, and the plot itself was very internal, and Elise as a main character is definitely a character you're either going to, I don't even want to say love or hate, because I found it very frustrating being in her head. She's very, very riddled by a lot of insecurities and mental illnesses, and that also plays a part in this where I think it could be argued that this is either magical realism or it's all inside the main character's head. So the ending for this one for me just didn't really land the way that I wanted it to. This was so creeping, and I really enjoyed like the build up, and I just felt like the build up, there was a lot there was a lot percolating, and then it just kind of fizzled out rather than ended with a bang for me. I thought the setup of this one was so cool. It's definitely a premise that I have not read before, and just the transitory nature of this character arriving at a place that's way out of her comfort zone and having to confront a lot of different insecurities while at the same time being in a very bizarre situation and just feeling very alone and isolated when creepy things start happening. I thought that was done well, and I'll definitely pick up something else by this author in the future, but I think just with the caveat for myself that I should expect maybe more of a weird, bizarre literary fiction rather than a horror. I did really enjoy the commentary on hunger in here. This is definitely a hunger-based narrative. We have, of course, the setup of these different characters going to this production assembly line to help turn beets into sugar, and so there's a lot about the industrial nature of that, who works at these farms, whose labor is used to produce the food that we make, and then hunger just as a means of striving for a higher social class, upward mobility, and then also Elise's hunger in terms of her eating disorders. All were definitely explored a lot in here. So for this vlog, all three of the books, even though I had varying levels of enjoyment for them, definitely all explored hunger as themes, and I think I could definitely recommend each of them to very different audiences. Just in terms of reading hunger-based horror, I think this vlog was really successful. So my least favorite book would have to be The Lamb, just for personal preference for me. I don't tend to love folktale, folk horror, or like a fairy tale sort of narration style, and this definitely felt like a modern day fairy tale. I liked the exploration of cannibalism. This is the first time I've read a cannibal book that has to deal with a mother and a daughter relationship and cannibalism as a metaphor for just a very, very unhealthy mother-daughter relationship. This has been making the rounds on BookTube and Bookstagram, and it seems like I'm in the minority. A lot of people are loving this one, so even though I didn't love it, don't let that detract you from picking this one up. I just wish, just in terms of the pacing, that it would have been a little bit shorter, maybe a novella. I think it would have worked a lot better for me, but I would be cautiously intrigued on picking up something else from this author in the future, because I did enjoy the commentary and the themes and the story setup. Just some of the pacing and some of the way that like the story and everything went down just wasn't my favorite. But if you like a folky modern fairy tale, I think you could really enjoy this one. And then the second book would have to be Beta Vulgaris, with the caveat, even though this vlog says hunger-based horror, I'm okay calling this one horror. I definitely feel like it's a book that could straddle a bunch of different genres. I don't think it's mismarketed as it being a horror, but it's definitely more of a literary horror than just like a standard horror story. So know that going in. I liked the exploration of consumerism and that sort of hunger and class consciousness, and then also the eating disorder talks and commentary in this one. Big trigger warning for that one is the constant internal monologue about disordered eating that our main character faces. So if that's a trigger for you, probably steer away from this one because it's a huge focus of the book. I did like those conversations. I just felt like this one also didn't really nail the landing, but in just different ways than The Lamb did. I liked this one. This is definitely one if you like books that are considered plotless, because it does have a plot, but it's really focused on the internal rather than the external. I think you could enjoy this one. Definitely a very strange book, and a book that I'll probably think about for quite a long time just because of the weird, interesting setup, and I did really enjoy the writing style here. And then of course that leads us to my favorite of this vlog, and that would be Hungerstone. This was definitely my favorite book that I read for this vlog. I loved the explorations of vampires and hunger as a means of just craving something more out of your life, craving self-expression, craving like living life on your own terms. I thought this was a great retelling of Carmilla. It's one where if you've read the source material, I think you'll really enjoy this one, but if you haven't read it, I feel like this is a story that stands alone on its own pretty well. I really enjoyed this one, and this is definitely for my gothic fiction lovers because this one is very slow, but I loved the slow and creeping pace of this one, and I really had a fun time with it. I love the cover. It's based on the artwork The Nightmare, which is by Henry Fuseli, and it was from 1781. So I love this piece of art. I think it works beautifully with what this book is talking about, and just the hunger themes perfect in here, and this has just been such a great year for vampire horror. So that is it for this vlog. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making this video and exploring some hunger themes in terms of horror novels. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my content. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!